For years now, mental health services have been dominated by psychologists and counselors who will tell you that the way to change how you feel is to change the way you think. Now, that's sometimes true, but there's a part of your mentality that's deeper than your thoughts. The older, more instinctual parts of your brain actually have dominance over your thinking cortex. Modern research into trauma and anxiety suggests that your nervous system is actually the one calling the shots. Therapists act like this is such a revelation. Actually, people outside the healthcare field had this figured out a long time ago. To make it clear, you can't think your way out of emotions very well. You can, however, use your nervous system differently. Your brain is wired by past experiences, but it can be rewired. Those emotions that get stuck can be overridden by correct use of the body. Your path to thinking more clearly and being more calm and happy involves using your body to play out something that the deep, old brain knows very well. Combat. Fighting to stay alive. Your caveman ancestors left you a gift that your therapist might never get a handle on. Let me tell you about something that happened to me. Years ago, I was with a buddy of mine, and I was not having a good time, in spite of doing lots of fun things. I had suspected that I was suffering from depression, and I don't recall now if there was any reason, but I was simply not deriving joy from anything. We found ourselves in an entertainment district, a section of the city along the waterfront, and with a string of bars and restaurants that we sampled, we ended up at Hooters. That's when I knew something was seriously wrong, because if a man is at Hooters and he's not at least smiling, there's some kind of pathology going on. We got a couple drinks and went out onto the rear patio that overlooked the river. It was attractively designed with little gardens and multi-level decks, and we had it pretty much to ourselves. It was a beautiful, sunny, warm day with an absolutely blue sky. A motorboat pulled up to the pilings below us and docked. 3 guys exited the boat and came bounding up the stairs and entered Hooters from the rear door. One part of my brain exulted in what seemed to be a kind of paradise. Just drive your boat up to the dock and go into Hooters and have a drink with your buddies. But another part of my brain resisted and said, somehow, this just isn't fun at all. My buddy was enjoying the attention of one of the waitresses, and I wandered off to the upper part of the deck where some steps led to an archway. I went through and stepped up to another lot where there wasn't much of anything, and then I noticed the post-forming part of the archway was wound around with thick rope, purely for the waterfront theme. And it reminded me, of course, of a makiwara. I tried a couple tentative jabs at the post, and the thick, weathered rope had the kind of rough resilience that I always loved about the traditional rope makiwara. I did a few more, and then I really got into it. With no one around to see me, I started wailing away on the thing. And not having any give, the post caused some serious kickback, but that didn't matter. I was enjoying the reverberations through my body when my buddy reappeared. Apparently, the sound was reverberating through the river valley. He said, "I knew that's what you were doing." The sun was beating down. I had worked up a sweat. My knuckles were glowing. And suddenly, the sky looked bluer and the world looked better. We went back down to the deck, and the rest of my drink tasted good, and the waitress looked cuter. All because of the makiwara effect. The obvious explanation for the layman is that I released some anger by hitting the thing, but I examined that idea, and I wasn't conscious of any anger at the time. Not to say I couldn't have had any unconscious anger, but I'm fairly sure that my depression at the time was endogenous, not related to circumstances, but due to a biochemical imbalance. Most people, karate people included, would simply assume that hitting something has the sole effect of releasing pent-up anger. But this is the concept that I want to explore. Such assumptions are based on the idea, the erroneous idea, I should say, that anger is a negative emotion. Now, despite various studies being shown that anger has a correlation with elevated blood pressure and sympathetic nerve stress, etc., reason dictates that anger is no more a negative influence than the predominance of any other emotion. In the traditional Oriental medical framework, for example, excessive anger is said to injure the liver. Excessive fear injures the kidneys. Excessive joy damages the heart. How many cautions do you hear about being too happy? What if someone told you, oh, you better stop laughing so much and take care of your heart? I can tell you that medical data become established based on what the researcher wants to look at. While I'm sure that Makiwara practice is effective for and is often used for the release of unwanted anger, I'm just as sure that this is not the sole mental benefit. This illustrates one of the most enduring misconceptions about karate in general. The glaring eyes, grunting sounds, screams, and bold movements as two karateka punch and kick each other are collectively interpreted as expressions of anger by those who do not understand. But anger is not what drives the performance. Those things are an expression of exercising the will, something that's focused on no particular emotion. Anger is useful for driving your motivation and training intensity, as I point out in another video, and I would recommend you go see that too. It's called Get Addicted to Karate. But who looks at someone's grimacing face as he completes a marathon, or lifts a heavy weight, or reaches the top of a tall mountain? No one says, oh, he's angry, right? But they do when they observe karate because they fear it. It might be said that all emotions can be found in such a facial expression. When a person makes his or her body do something difficult, or puts it in a position of danger and the likelihood of being hurt, or pounds an inanimate object that's hard and unforgiving, that takes an engagement of the will that goes beyond the norm and certainly beyond anger. Now, the average person's greatest test of will on a typical day is trying not to eat a pastry. Certainly not a trial of courage that could result in physical damage. Kumite practice with another karateka is a test of both skill and will. The skill of the participants being equal, the one with the greater will usually triumphs. In the same way, the Makiwara is an opponent that must be defeated by not giving in to pain or fear. I can't yet give a detailed explanation of which neurotransmitters are activated and in what quantity in the brain when you're hitting the Makiwara. But there are many studies on exercise in general showing increased levels of endorphins, dopamine, oxytocin, and serotonin, just like the drugs for depression do. Just like the drugs for depression do. But the therapeutic effect I experienced is one that many thousands have also experienced, and we didn't need to understand exactly why. We just know we feel good if we connect physical movements to a mental state that recreates a life and death situation. It doesn't matter if it's karate, kung fu, or just swinging a big stick. With regular training, karateka around the world are either relieving or preventing dysphoria, depression, anxiety, and other unproductive mental states. I think it's important to not mistake the emotional content of the training for anger. After all, that's the uneducated person's interpretation of what he sees. And the person who's not subjected himself to any activity that severely challenges the will naturally assumes that an intense expression, glaring eyes, set mouth, and poised limbs equals anger. But karate, like other challenging pursuits, is like weightlifting for the mind. Gradually, the muscles of the will become larger, and the trainee finds it more and more possible to do things that he or she would not have thought possible a few short years before. In this way, karate training, if it's consistent, is a tremendous boost to achievement. In addition, it can regulate those biochemical factors that impair our mental health. I think we will find with further study that the makiwara is the Prozac of karate. Pound away.